Welcome to Disruptor Confessions. I'm your host, John Ayers. This conversation is going to be for leaders who are on the front lines of what I call the always on culture. Today, we're talking to a practitioner who doesn't just manage the noise, she actually uses her doctorate in quantitative marketing to make sense of the noise. Dr. Noelle Seybert leads social media at the University of Texas. She's managed digital at Pepperdine University, most recently at Colorado, and now one of the largest universities in the world, UT Austin. Noelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I thought about how do we start this conversation and maybe think about what does a day look like for you? So let me frame it like this. I think about social media as like an editorial calendar that you're planning for in the future, like you're planning and projecting forward what might be in the future, juxtaposed with what do you have to react to? So can you talk about what does a typical day look like, being that you're leading social at higher ed space?
Yeah, I love this question because I'm always I chuckled when you first started asking it because there really isn't, a typical day. And so that's what I love about my job. So a typical kind of everything, if there's nothing going on, nothing happening in the world, nothing that we need to react to, I'll come in, I'll look at the data from the previous day, or if it's Monday, we'll look for the previous week. And my job is really around the strategy. So I look at what's coming up, what we do need to react to, or what's changed, or if something happened. We are a massive campus, and the schools I've worked at I have progressively gotten larger. So with each position and school change, then I kind of changes what the strategy will look like and what's going on at the school. And then I make sure I check in on my team to see, do you have what you need for today to get the content created or to get it published, or my social listening colleague, making sure that they have everything they need in terms of brand reputation or risk and anything else that's happening either adjacent or tangential to UT or when I was at CU or at Pepperdine. And so really looking at the beginning of the day is just kind of like setting the stage for what the day will be, and then hope that the day follows that plan, which it very rarely does in some of the best ways. So we do that. I love looking at all the different data and kind of slicing and dicing it together. I write reports and then really just react to what's happening.
You are kind of doing a little bit of both, kind of trying to plan forward, trying to plan for the day, the week, the month, or the quarter, but also having to react in the moment based on news or events that are occurring.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about higher education is that it's very cyclical, right? We know the students show up in August. We know they leave in December, they come back in January, and they leave again in May or June. And every school has traditions or different things that happen. You know when homecoming is going to be, that the big fundraising event is here, different pillars. But then within that, there's all these little pieces that, while yes, they could have happened last year, you can look back at last year's data, the year before, and I get to do the same thing, but better, and make it better each time is the goal. And try new things. That's the other beautiful thing about having higher education is that, yes, every year we've got new student orientation and students move in and families show up. They're all very excited, but also like a side of sadness. So what can we do each fall better than telling the exact same story every year? And so being the hyper competitive data person that I am, I get to look back every year and be like, okay, this worked or didn't work last year. Let's change it, do it better. I love running paid ads and testing different things and doing all that variable testing, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
You actually just poked at something I'm curious about. And I don't know if you have a window into this, but when you're thinking about higher ed social versus like a corporate social media manager role, what kind of activities do you sense you are doing differently or that you kind of have to focus on in higher ed versus more of a business world? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah. So when I finished my master's degree, everyone was like, oh, you have an MBA, you need to go work in corporate. I'm like, sure. So I moved from San Diego to LA, and that was a mistake. So I worked for actually a business consultant. And so I was his marketing director for a while and got a taste of the B, really like B2B and like B to kind of C with him. So he, again, was a business consultant. And so working with how we showed up at conventions, how we showed up, how he as a personal brand showed up, how his company brand showed up. And so it was very different than higher education. And we were both in a way selling widgets. A lot of times people think higher education isn't selling anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're selling the brand experience is a diploma. That sounds very cool, like rash or brash, but it's true. Like, we are selling a brand experience. We're selling a diploma, really. And then with with the business consultant, we were selling his books, his appearances, where he was going, what conventions he was at, and then really just his paradigm, following the strengths movement. And so having that kind of posting over there was a lot less reaction, in my opinion, of like what's happening in the world versus a school that has 55,000 people or 40,000 people from all over the world in one single space. And so there's a lot more sensitivity. And I don't mean that in a way of like safe space. I mean that in a way of like, how do we approach tone and being better in that approach, and not just, oh, it makes sense to me, like it should be fine. We have to really consider a lot of different audiences. Whereas that one, we had a very clear target audience and we're able to talk directly to that consumer and that customer. Where in higher ed, your customer is very wide. Your audience base is very wide.
This is also something super interesting to me. What you just touched on, the word brand. Universities, especially something at the scale of UT with tens of thousands of students, really having a global kind of footprint. In some respects, it does have a brand, Hook 'em Horns and UT and all of that. So there's certainly a brand, but there's also almost like a faceless institution that doesn't really feel human to the general population. So like from a social like standpoint, how do you manage that? How do you manage like I'll call it an authentic voice of the brand in the context of that scale?
That's the everyday challenge of people in my position, is how do you make a set of buildings and a set of land connect with an audience? And the way I've found to be successful in my positions across any university that I work at is find the lore and find the nostalgia. And then you really tap into those, and that's going to get, the campus lore. People will always come into that. You can always talk about nostalgia, and that will really get people going. And then talking about the people rather than the programs, in my opinion. I'd rather talk about the people within the programs and what they're doing, what they're discovering, what they're researching, and really putting more faces on channels instead of buildings. And so it goes back to basic sales, right? Like, people want to buy from people. And I think that's the same way when it comes to universities, as they want to connect with their alma mater from their experiences. While their experiences happened in a building, they didn't happen because of said building. They happened because of people. And so being able to really drive into the people, the faces, the memories, that then people can be, I want that, or I lived that, and then I'm living that. And so you get that continuum of future student, alumni base. And then you have this whole thing at UT and at the University of Colorado, is everyone kind of on the outside that have no affiliation with the university, but they have a passion for whether it's the sports teams or the theater programs that are there. They're also part of your audience that have no true connection, like how we think about connection of a university and an alma mater. But sometimes theirs is much stronger than an alumni. And so it's how you connect all of them. It's just a fun challenge of testing things and trying to really figure out how to do that, is why I have been in this for now 15, 16 years. It's always a challenge. It's always different. And I like that. I mean, doing the same thing every day would drive me nuts.
What's interesting, and I don't know if you coined the phrase, but this notion of 24/7, you call it 25/8, and we'll probably talk about that. But like you just mentioned, you might have an affinity towards a particular academic program or a particular sports, maybe the UT football or a science professor. So you're not a one-person shop. You have either team members that are working with you, for you, or alongside you. Can you talk a little bit about, I'll just call it like I see it, social media has become kind of this toxic, cesspool. It's God, do I dare look at the comments? What are people saying about me, about our brand? How do you navigate that? How do you, I don't want to say protect, but how do you navigate with your team members to kind of collect thoughts and respond appropriately? How do you manage that?
Yeah, one of my favorite coffee mugs says, whatever you do, don't check the comments, because it's so true. And so I think the word protect is actually the right word to use for it. So as someone in this position, I think others that are also in my position, people who have been mentors to me or that I've learned from, once you get, they always make the joke like, well, that's why they pay you the big bucks. No, but like really, that is why, is when you get into a certain level of higher ed, or not even just at higher ed, but in social media in general, is that you do take the brunt of it. And I've been doing this for so long that it's water off the duck's back. There are a few that you're like, oh, that stings. But it's not you. Where on the flip side, in my last 3 institutions, I've hired fresh out of school young women. And so it's their first job. They're very excited for social media. And I have to really be like, you are not the brand. When they are yelling into a void. They're in their mother's basement with a keyboard. They are not yelling at you, or they're not making that comment at you. And that is a very tough lesson to learn. And I remember having to learn that. My therapist is some of the best money I spend on myself, and it's understanding how to do that, and how I have to be very perceptive when I have intentional one-on-ones with every member of my team every week, just to be like, okay, how's it going? How's this? We had an unfortunate, very sad, a tragic accident in Austin recently, and having to have a team that needs to be on social listening, late into the night to see what's happening, see what's being said, taking all of that in. I'm able to then be like, cool, like take the rest of the day off, take tomorrow off, do what you need. Or is being at work better than being at home? And I have to figure that out with all my different personalities. And so that really does come down to making sure you're not just a manager, you're leading people, and you're helping them and identifying that what they might not see as, like, I can see changes in attitude or mood or just kind of their vibe, and really call that out not in a mothering way. I am older than all my staff, but in a way that I care about them, because I truly do. And so I think that really sets apart social leaders from others, is that there's that personal understanding, that personal, you might not be impacted that hard, but others may.
You start to become it if you're not careful. It's interesting you mentioned the recent tragedy. In higher ed, you are kind of very aware of that. In corporate, you might be tangentially aware, but typically in corporate, it might be more about, earnings, quarterly earnings or something like that. In higher ed institutions, you might have a dean that's just written and authored a new white paper that gets global recognition, and that's one narrative. You might have a student, accelerating in sports, and that's one narrative. Or a tragedy that might be local, regional, international. So you're kind of, you mentioned social media listening. Can you share broadly the kind of team members you have, the kind of skills, or how do you?
I am very lucky that when I arrived at UT almost a year ago to the date, I got to build out a team. And so I have a content creator, and she does all what we call cotton candy content. And so we have cotton candy and broccoli content. And so she does a lot of the fun, the trends, and speaks youth better than I do. And so, because she is a youth. And so she's able to really handle that and just excel at that area. And then work on student interviews, really getting them to talk and open up, and getting video first content and very visual content. Then I also have another direct report who does a lot, is more of the specialty on the broccoli content. And so more of that, the research and the understanding on that side, but then also a bigger part of his job, just given all the things that have been happening, are monitoring all the different platforms, and not just conversations where we've been tagged in, but that we've been just said, UT Austin or UT. And so that's the social listening and monitoring side. And so that, in my last probably 5 to 6 years, I would say, with social listening, has become even more important than just having good and funny content, is that teams need to have dedicated social listening people, and able to find and identify themes, trends, conversations happening, again, that you're not tagged in, that you would have never seen if you're only relying on tagged sources coming in on your software that you use. Hopefully you're using a software. And so that you would just miss whole conversations. He finds things in the deepest holes of Reddit that are really good for us to know about, because then it really gives an opening into the student life. And like Yik Yak, if you've ever dabbled in that, you want to talk about a toxic cesspool. But we need to monitor that, and we need to see, and yes, it's a small portion of the student audience that's actually using that, but it gives us an idea of like, oh man, like these students are really stressed right now. It's midterms. It helps me drive content strategy ideas. Oh, okay, let's get some more resources around studying, around mental health resources, or like opt outside study areas during midterms. And so it really helps drive strategy on my end. And both of those positions together make up the social media team within the central marketing office. But then we have 18 schools and colleges. So I have this huge Teams chat that has everybody that has social media in their title in there. I had the same thing at CU, I had the same thing at Pepperdine. And so it's just a way to really kind of flatten the org. Like, yes, the central marketing office is full of experts that can help you, but then also I want us all to chat. And so like what's happening in one school could really help benefit or be a partnership with another. Let's not operate in these silos that higher ed is so well known for. Let's try to knock some of those down and all work together, and then just make a bigger, stronger brand for whatever the constituent area may be.
Can I ask you about, you just made me think about like flattening all the social voices out there, right? So you have an awareness of a dean or professor or someone who might be in social that has 3 listeners or 3 million followers, right? Like you kind of have to navigate all of that. Can I ask you, do you see social media as a channel, much like you might see web or email or mobile, or like, how do you see social at higher ed?
Yeah, it's definitely one of, if not the front door. I know a lot of times people say the website's the front door to a university. Well, these days people are finding the website because of a funny social post or something they saw on social. And so I think it's like a duplex, right? Like we can share the front door, we can have 2. And so social, I really look at it as the front door of a university. And so depending on if you're an incoming student or let's say like a sophomore in high school who's just trying to figure out where they want to go, what they want to be when they grow up, social is really an easy way for us to connect with them. And so we can tell that's where the brand experience comes into play, where we really show off what you can do here, whether you're a student. And this goes for any institution. This is not just unique to UT. That it's something strategy-wise at CU and at Pepperdine as well. And so it's telling that student story, really, like I could picture myself going here. And so we have that as an option and a kind of an avenue in. And then this idea of UTMs and like how we can track everything and do page pathing. And so I implemented that at the University of Colorado. I'm on the works of implementing it here, where we can see exactly what they came in from Facebook on this day, clicking on this link. And then I look at it and page pass them through analytics later, so that then I'm like, oh, I wanted them to go here, but they went here. We need to change up the content. And so the website and social really work hand in hand to help tell a full, complete story. And then my goal is to make less phone calls or less emails of FAQs that we can answer. Let's just answer them before they ask them. And so that's how they can really work together.
I'm going to start calling you the doctor of data, because I know you're into like the data details, but I kind of want to ask you around this notion of social media being really important and kind of the front door, because there's an aspect of me that, and probably many of the people watching this, we're just shouting into the void. No one's really listening. And now algorithms are just creating the content. So can you put some numbers or data behind what you're talking about? Like how much of this influence is happening through social and connecting back to a web experience or a campus visit? What are you seeing right now as we are in Q1 going into Q2 of 2026? Are people just shouting into the void? Are algorithms just driving it? Or is there real tangible, like, talk to us about that?
There are a lot of shouters. I hope that I am not one, and I hope my team is not one. And so it's funny you say I'm Dr. Data, because I looked in making that my license plate when I lived in Colorado and somebody already had it, so I didn't take it. But in terms of the, are people shouting into the void? Yeah, you're going to have people who are doing that. And so when it comes to an actual strategy, your strategy shouldn't be, let's just throw it out there and hope people go for it. And so for us, just tonight, obviously this will air later, but tonight we're doing an AMA on Reddit about financial aid. And so we really track in how many people are coming into that, how many questions we answer, what's the upvote ratio, how many views, how many impressions, all of that. And so I then will take that tomorrow and I'll do, from before 5 p.m. when it kicked off to during it. And then after I'll wait a week and then grab the after. And so we did that before with an admissions one, back when early action was ready to go. And we took that data into then helping optimize for this financial aid one. And then we just keep doing that. And that is where I always joke that I'm happiest in a spreadsheet. And so that's where I like to live. And I mentioned I'm hyper competitive, and it's mostly with myself. I couldn't play the sports, but I like to watch them. But I am competitive on, can we do this better, faster, stronger? That's really where that my quantitative marketing. They're like, you have a doctorate and you're in social media. And I'm like, oh, contraire. It is not just posting puppies. Like, let me tell you. And so it's really making that strategy. And so you're not yelling. You could be yelling, but like with strategy.
Are algorithms and just kind of fake accounts and all of that playing into how do you manage that? How do you view
algorithms. That? The algorithm, it's my job security because nobody understands them. So they always come out and they're like, especially Adam Mosari, I never pronounce his name correctly, from Instagram. He's like, oh, we haven't changed the algorithm. I'm like, lies. You sit on a throne of lies because what we've been trying and has been working really well for us all of a sudden isn't. So what are you doing? And so LinkedIn does the same thing, but at least LinkedIn's a little bit more transparent about their algorithm. They kind of try to tell you how to game it, which is great. And so that is, I think, the biggest thing when you talk. It is my first language. So you and I can talk about algorithms. We can talk about data. We can talk about social, vanity metrics, all the different things. When I am storytelling up, I have to make what we know and understand make sense to those that may not be as fluent in this area, but still showcase how to tell data's story. And the algorithm really impacts the data. And so you can't just be like, oh, the algorithm. I mean, you can try, but then they're going to be like, so what are you doing about it? And so figuring out how to work within that. A lot of times it's just posting something is going to hit and then it doesn't. And you then start looking around, talking to your colleagues at other SEC and big D1 schools and figuring out, are we all experiencing this right now? Okay, what's going on? Who's tried it? Who's won? Who's doing this? And it's a lot of very communal. I love that about higher education is that we all really are all in this together and figuring it out as we go and learning and testing and growing with each. That's my typical day. Let's add that to things that are on my typical day is learning and growing from the day before.
So going back to what you just said, you're kind of a great supporting cast of characters within the higher ed, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of chaos that you're trying to keep up with, like the pace of change. I call this disruptor confessions. Like it's constant disruption. How do you manage a digital presence at and for a higher ed institution without like losing sleep and losing your own kind of sanity and humanity in that process?
Yeah, that I can very honestly say I didn't used to do this well. I was terrible at it and worked way too much. I was all, 25/8. It was just burnout central, but I thought that's what I had to do. And then the older I got, I had a significant injury a handful of years ago that took me out for a couple of weeks because I had surgery and painkillers and all that. You shouldn't be writing tweets when you're on painkillers. And it really just put into perspective what mattered. I know that sounds like really trite, but it's true. And it really helped kind of figure out like, okay, I'm not curing cancer. I'm talking about people who are curing cancer. I'm not landing on the moon. I'm talking about people who are. And so there needs to be a boundary. And so what I started doing when I would hire new people is like, don't let my lack of boundaries be your example because it's too late for me. And then I reframed it like, no, it's not. Like you train people on your boundaries. And so it's figuring out how to manage that with also still knowing, if I work directly with the upper leadership here, when they need something, like obviously like I'm available, but there's some things of training people of like, is this a now thing or can it wait till tomorrow? And so what I do with my staff is like, I'll schedule Teams messages. I try not to message them after hours. And so I'll schedule Teams or schedule emails so that it's, not important tonight. And so like, just because I'm working doesn't mean I expect you to be working. And so that's one big way that I try to do that with my team. But then also it's understanding like how I think when you're coming up into leadership in the chaos, it's like you figure out how people work and what really motivates them. And so does getting comp time, really motivate them, but you got to make sure you don't burn them out. And so it's that delicate balance of very eager young professionals who are new, but they've got, 50 years left of this, 60 years before they retire. And so balancing all of that.
Can I ask you about like just AI guidelines? Because you can't police everyone all the time, but have you worked on AI guidelines? Have you crafted them? Have you talked about them? Talk a little bit about how you view AI guidelines and what your role is.
AI guidelines are so hot right now. Everybody wants one. So I worked at a previous institution. I was on the committee that created the guidelines for communicators of how and when not to and when to use them. And then here at UT, we have them as well. And so it goes back to your point of policing, like who's going to enforce all of that. And so that's really where it comes down to trusting your communicators and trusting the people who do it. And then when obvious violations happen, having the hard conversation of, yeah, I understand that AI trend is going wild, but like, have you seen your comments? People don't want this. And so I'll be honest, I published something for Emoji Day. I can't remember when it falls in the calendar year, but I created all these different cool emoji mosaics using emojis of like the Longhorn or the tower, very iconic things at UT. And I used ChatGPT for it, and I didn't think twice about it. I was like, who's going to do this by hand? Like, that's silly. Who would do that? People ripped us apart. And I was like, oh. And they're like, you have an art school. Like, why don't you have the art department doing this? I'm like, yes, you're right. Like, you're so right. And so it's learning as you go, especially with how, I don't want to say AI is new, but the prevalence of it is getting to where it's like, it can literally do everything. And I'm like, oh, just because it can doesn't mean it should. And so those are the conversations that I have around campus. Like, just because you can use AI for this doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. And this goes back to, I'll just say the word authenticity. How do you make sure that the social media feeds and the reactions and the kind of the narrative is authentic? How do you manage that? How do you infuse that so it does come across as authentic and not automated? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's it's definitely a challenge. And so for us, we have AP style, and at every school, it's been AP or Chicago style for the UT News or any news site, right? Like CU Boulder Today, UT News, a Pepperdine. I can't remember what it was called. Sorry, old team. So it's that daily news. And so and that's very AP style or Chicago style, very buttoned up, very, this is a news article. Well, if we posted like that on social, it wouldn't go over very well. And so we have different voices for each platform based on the goal of that audience. So LinkedIn's going to be, we call it the Briefcase app. That one's going to be a little bit more buttoned up, but we also are Longhorns and have a very Texas culture. And so we can really infuse that into it. The Hook'em hand here at CU, it was Scobuffs. We have the little language, and it goes back to what I had said earlier about campus lore and nostalgia. If you can infuse that into, buttoned up on the Briefcase app over on LinkedIn, but then you can have like sassy fun on Twitter, because what is that anymore? Like it's anything goes over there. And then on Instagram is our big audience of students across every university I've worked at. And so we have a lot more like dad jokes really do well over there, and they would not do very well on LinkedIn. And I know that because it's two different audiences. And so that's really how you infuse just what you know about your audience, what you know about your school or company or brand, and being able to walk that fine line of approaching them how and where they are, but also with language that doesn't feel like an ad, because people don't want advertisements. They want something, they're there to escape. And so how do you help them escape, but into like your world, especially if you have a call to action you need them to do? It's walking that fine line of talking as if they were here on campus and they would just hear it, or at your office or whatever.
Yeah. How much of your work is leading the voice, and how much are you responding to what's already kind of been dictated by the broader university?
Yeah, I came at such a lucky time. CU already had it pretty established, and it was great. It worked, and same with Pepperdine. It was established when I got there, but then I was able to kind of change it. It's like a cruise ship, right? It takes a little bit of change. Higher ed change doesn't happen very quickly, but you can just test things. Again, it goes back to testing and having the data like, hey, this worked a little better. This is working better than this one. And so I think every time you have a change in leadership and social, you're going to feel it as a user, but it shouldn't be abrupt. It shouldn't be like, oh, who's at the helm now? Like that. Voice should really, especially for a well-established brand or company, should really be a collective effort. So the brand team needs to be involved. Social team really fits on editorial or brand team. Social just kind of fits everywhere. And so it's a conversation between the editorial, social, maybe the marketing team for marketing copy. We all kind of agree on this approach to language. And then at UT specifically, like we are a little bit, we still do AP style-ish on social, but it's a little more casual because we are just more of a casual, it's Texas, and it's just kind of more of our culture. And so figuring out how to delicately do that without people, you're always going to have the grammar police and you're like, yeah, but this is how students talk. And so you would never do like a student-y caption on LinkedIn because that just wouldn't fly. But you can kind of sometimes sort of get away with it on Facebook if it's like reeled in a little bit. And so it's figuring out how to balance that. But that's really where the authenticity comes. It's when schools do copy and paste across the 4 platforms. I'm like, don't do that. Like, what are you doing? You would never say the exact same thing to your grandma that you would say to your best friend. Like,
actually, that's a great segue because I wanted to ask you specifics. You talked about Instagram and LinkedIn, and can you talk specifics? What platforms or channels are you using at higher ed? What are you using? What are you seeing growing more? What are you seeing falling away? I'll just throw out like X, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. What are you seeing going away? What are you seeing? Or just talk a little bit about channels.
Yeah. So higher ed specifically is very into Instagram for student communication. There's really like no getting around it. And so Instagram's our student audience or young alumni and prospective students to an extent. And then X, I will never call it that. That made me cringe. Twitter. So Twitter is here. I treat it more as like a bulletin board, and it's very big in sports. And so sports Twitter is wonderful. But beyond that, it's pretty harsh. Some of the things that happen over there. Science Twitter used to be really big, and then Mastodon tried to overcome Science Twitter. Mastodon was very confusing because it was server-based and people couldn't figure it out, so then they came back to Twitter. But I don't think Science Twitter has ever gone away. I still think that that's a strong channel for that. Facebook is more of our parents, older alumni, and then just fans, just kind of catch-all. And then LinkedIn, we have a ton of LinkedIn alumni who have like claimed us. So that makes it really great to be able to talk with them. And then community leaders and other leaders across other institutions. I really like to look at what they're up to over there. And if we have a cool paper and we do a paid campaign or something, we did this at CU too, targeting deans at different schools of like, hey, look what we're doing. And so it can get into their feed over there. In terms of Blue Sky and Mastodon, I think I understand that Facebook came out of nowhere and we never thought MySpace was going away. And then look what happened. I think Mastodon's too confusing with the servers, and it feels very echo chambery if you're in one server and then the other. And so I haven't really explored it too much. And then Blue Sky, it's there. I think it really grew and then really fizzled out pretty fast. It was just kind of a flashpoint. TikTok in the state of Texas, we are legally not allowed to use it on government devices or Wi-Fi, so we are not over there. What the sale means and what that all is going to change, I don't know. We're keeping an eye on it and seeing, and that's at the governor's, like a executive order from him. So I can't speak directly to TikTok.
Are there other platforms that you're looking at, or are those kind of the big ones?
Reddit's huge. Reddit is huge. Yeah, Reddit is what I love exploring and looking at because it's so big. But also the thing I love about it is that you can't just go in and be like overtly advertising to people because Reddit will downvote you so fast. Like that is not what Reddit's about. So it really is like, how do you authentically show up in Reddit in a way that doesn't feel forced? That's a fun challenge. And so there's different ways that they have conversational ads and different ways that you can insert yourself without being like, hello, youths, like I'm here.
What about recency and frequency of engagement? So I know you're not managing every social channel coming out of the University of Texas because you've got deans and students and God knows what. But in your central hub, like what's the recency and frequency of like engagement that you're doing?
We try to post at least 3 to 4 grid posts on Instagram a week, whether that's a reel, whether that's just a collage of photos. We try to do stories every day. So we'll have something that goes up on the story every day. And then Facebook, it's probably about 5 to 6 a week. Same with LinkedIn. And then Twitter, or I don't really have a limit on that because it's kind of more of an awareness bulletin board. And that's how we've really been handling it. And so those are our top 4. And so it's multiple a day. But what goes on LinkedIn might not also go on Twitter or Facebook. And so that's really where I come in looking at the calendars. Like, here's all of our available content. Here's what's coming up. Here's what's happening right now. What does LinkedIn get? What does Facebook get that may not be the same that day? Because this is better going to serve that audience and this audience wouldn't care about it as much, and I've got something else that fits more of the Longhorn moms, I can post that on Facebook instead, because that wouldn't necessarily be something Twitter would react to. And so it's really looking at the different pieces of content, figuring out what the heck I want them to do with this piece of content, and then who would respond to it.
Because of where you're at in your career and socials like history or socials maturity, you've really been kind of in the weeds since it really kind of came into the market. I feel like you've got a better temperature check or a pulse on what's happening. Can I ask you, is this what you're just sharing, like which channels and recency and frequency of platform engagement? Is that fairly standard in higher ed? Are you doing things slightly different, or is that fairly standard?
We are very fortunate at UT to have a team. What makes me really sad and more upset at the leadership of other institutions and really other brands is when I hear that people are a team of one. That is impossible. I think it's unfair to that social person to have them be a team of one. There's just too much to do it well. And so what that tells me and what that signals to me is that that leadership team doesn't actually care about social. I think higher ed is behind in that. There are a lot of team of ones, and at not necessarily at maybe a schools the size of CU or UT, but I was at Pepperdine, and that's then. I know they are no longer, so I'm not saying they are now. But that was back when it was very new. Twitter was still going.
Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah, it was like we landed on a comment hashtags was like what was trending over there, and so.
Right.
But these days, now in 2026, when I hear team of ones, I'm just like, oh man, that's unfortunately the norm. And so for us, we are a little bit outside of the norm because I do have a team, and I was able to hire a whole team when I got here, which I'm so grateful and so lucky to have. But not everybody has that. So in that regard, we are different. But I think in every aspect of a social team, there is that, hey, we need to plan for now, the what ifs, the what's happening, all the different planning. I just don't know if everyone is able to do that at the level that we're doing it and what our peer and aspirational schools are able to do. I know University of Michigan crushes it. They've got a great team, great leader over there. And so they're kind of like the one that we all look towards, like, we want to be like UMich. And so it's in that regard, I think we're different, but I don't think it's fair to say the other ones who don't do that, they might not just have the resources to be able to do that.
That makes complete sense, and I get it. I think the other question I would have is, and you be honest with me on how much you want to share, but I am curious, when things go really wrong, have you either been involved in something that has been published in social experience that has been a disaster? Anything you've been directly involved in or that you've observed in the market? That's kind of the one question. And then what have you been involved in that has just been an incredible surprise and it worked so well? Can you share a little bit about best worst case scenario? And I'll let you decide how much you want to reveal.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it high level, but I definitely published something a handful of years ago that was completely tone deaf because I had decided to remove myself from the news cycle. I didn't want to know what was going on. It was all very bad and scary and awful. And so I just didn't care. I was like, nope, blah, 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 blah. So then I published something that was so incredibly tone deaf that the comment section very quickly let me know it was tone deaf. And I called my boss and was like, hey, I effed up, like, help, and just owned it because I'm like, I published this, here's why. And they were like, oh boy, yeah, I could see how that would go, but I also could see how you didn't know that, like, unless you were very involved in the news cycle. And so that sucked. That was a long few days of us, apologizing and we didn't take the post down. We just edited the caption and, hey, this was not intentionally to be, offending people. We, we're learning sort of thing. Please reach out if you need to know more. I can't remember exactly what we said. Yeah. That was a very humbling experience because it was mortifying because I'm like, oh, I could lose my job over this. Like it was, I catastrophized it that bad.
Not unheard of. I wouldn't say not commonplace, but not unheard of. It happens probably daily in some respects.
Yeah, and my bosses were just like, "Oh, you're not getting fired. Like you owned it. You didn't try to bury it." And so the fact that like within minutes I was like, "Hey, I effed up," called them. So they were like, "Oh, something happened. Like she's calling us. What's going on? Like if you know me at all, like that's a big deal." And so we just worked through it, and it was unfortunate, and I learned, and I have since never completely removed myself from the news cycle because that backfired. And so
So
it's
owning it
understanding
privately
that.
within the organization, but also
Mhm.
publicly owning it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
How
And then
about
what went wildly well? Let's see.
Yeah. How about something that you did or you were involved with or witnessed,
Yeah.
observed that you thought, oh, it's just kind of another day and it just blew
Yeah.
up to be this amazing, anything amazing?
So one of my favorite, every time you're interviewing, you get interviewed for a job, right? They're like, what post are you most proud of? And things that you really just fills your cup. There was a big fire in Colorado a couple of years ago. The Marshall Fire was the biggest one in Colorado history at the time. It was a blowtorch through suburbia. I mean, I think 1,000 homes just, and it was right by campus. And so we had, they still have it, like a resources kind of room. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it's where students of need or faculty or staff of need could get food, could get clothing, could get hygiene supplies, anything that they need. Well, at a time when the blowtorch through suburbia happened, like
Oh,
that
wow.
room and that program is going to be like severe, like such a high need and severe empty, right? Like it needs to be replenished. And so I worked with that team to be like, hey, do you have an Amazon wish list? Like, do you mind if we promote it? Like, I feel drawn to do this. I think it would be potentially could go really well, or people could be like, hey, we're all hurting. You never know when you put things on social. And so we did that, and they had to call and stop deliveries and so that they could come on a pallet. And they ended up getting 11 pallets of stuff that was just delivered. And my heart exploded. So I'm like, wow, a simple little social post is helping so many people. And all I had to do was talk to a couple of different people. And I knew it could go well. I didn't know it would go that well. And so
Yeah.
that's always my answer to like, what posts have you done, or what campaign have you
Yeah,
worked
no,
on? I'm like,
it's a
man.
powerful reminder. Yeah, it's a powerful
Mhm.
story, powerful reminder of what can be done
Mhm.
if if the energy is pointed in the right direction.
Yeah,
Can I ask
the
you,
good
can I
side
get
and
into
powerful side of social. It's like the good side of it. So
Yeah,
it's good
exactly.
to remind yourself that there are those moments.
What is someone out there in higher ed social doing that's completely disruptive? Have you seen anything recently that you're just like, I can't
Ooh.
believe they're doing it. I can't believe they're getting away with it, or can't believe I love what they're doing, or I'm shocked.
Mm.
Anybody you want to call out that like is just doing like amazing stuff? You mentioned Michigan, but like anybody in general in higher ed or
Yeah.
just media in general that you think is disrupting the status quo?
Yeah, one that immediately came to mind because sorry, Georgia, I'm going to steal this. So they do this amazing thing called Change. I think it's called Change Makers, and it's every fall. They use football players and they talk. So it's really hard. We are on the academic side, right? So talking about football all the time. Well, yes, it's going to get clicks. It's Texas football. SEC football is huge. And so we can't always talk about that because we're like the academic accounts. They have found a perfect way to do the Venn diagram of an academic and a football player, and in the middle where it intersects and what they can talk about. And I love their campaign so much. And so I looked at it and was like, we could do this maybe. And so we're already starting those conversations around how we can do that. And I think the disruptive piece of that, right, it just sounds like a social campaign. I think the disruptive piece of that is the fact that they are really putting the student and student athlete, which you don't see all the time. You see it at the end of the semesters where they're like, here's what our average GPA was for the team. That's really
Right.
that, or like, tutoring award, whatever that may be. They took it so many steps further and made it into an entire campaign. It's beautiful. It's so well shot. It's very intentional. It's not just like, oh, this guy does really well in his accounting class. They do it such a good job that I
Right.
can't wait to try and emulate it. So I'm just like, yes.
Well, I love that. I mean, that gets me to the next question, actually, because I'm curious. We talked about it a little bit about what your day is and kind of balancing like the long-term vision, the editorial calendar that you're trying to work on, but also balancing that with reacting, right, to what's here now. Let me ask you this. What is your job? Meaning, what is your objective? What are you trying to do?
So we are here to tell UT's brand story. And what that means is we are an R1 Carnegie designated, research institution, which means we're in the top tier of research institutions. But then we have amazing things that are happening in all areas and facets of research. And so it's telling that story. It's telling the story of students, the student experience, the placemaking, the things that make UT the 40 acres. And so it's telling those stories. It's also all the people here that really make it happen. And, this place couldn't exist. It would just be a bunch of buildings and concrete without the faculty and staff. So it's telling that story. And so I really look at myself as a storyteller and like connecting with different people. Now, each story could have a different call to action or a different goal in mind, but really telling that on a digital platform of telling a story, hooking them in. It's a lot of not clickbait, but just really quick hooks of grabbing people's attention in this economy. The attention economy is very scarce. And so trying to really grab that in. And so I'm really just a strategic storyteller when you boil it all down. And so it's finding these really cool stories, or these stories come to you and it's like, okay, how can we tell that on a social platform? Because we don't get 600 words. We get 6. And so it's how do we do that?
And in 3 seconds of someone's time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get like maybe 3 seconds. Yeah.
The duration of our attention.
Yeah, when I'm leading trainings, it's thumb stopping content. And so it's when you think about it, you're just doing this. And I'm like, what's going to make their thumb go like this? And then keep going. And so when I really train either new to the profession or trying to, hone their craft, that's really what I'm like, you need to stop the thumb, as trite as that sounds.
We talked a little bit about guidelines. Are you involved in, I don't want to training or education or teaching for what I would call like academic people who are pretty active in social? I'm just thinking about a professor or a dean or someone within the administration of the university. Do you work with them? Are you guiding them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have. At my previous institutions, we had a whole, when they did media training, there was a whole social media section to it as well. I know I've been here almost a year, but I'm still figuring out where everything is here. And so haven't quite gotten into that here, but it is, I did go in to get my doctorate so I could teach someday. It's one of my favorite things is to watch light bulb moments. And so at a previous institution, I had a whole LinkedIn course that people, this is how you optimize your LinkedIn and how you make it, yes, your research is very important, but it could be very boring and heady. So how do we make this more approachable? And so it's having my personality allows to have that kind of those sassy, candid conversations. And also being an academic as well really helps. And so, hey, I'm actually Dr. Noelle Seybert, what's going on? So being able to do that and training them, and they're so appreciative of being like, oh, okay. I'm like, this is how you can get your research out there further, especially if you're on Twitter. Like, what can you do? Who can you tag? Who do you follow? And it's not just about pushing content out there. It's more about the engagement side, and that will help the algorithm, that's dreaded algorithm, make you not look like a bot. So when you're actually engaging and working with people and commenting back and forth, liking things, retweeting things, whatever that may be, that gives you a human factor that I know the LinkedIn algorithm definitely looks at. And so it's figuring out how to teach that and game that while you're also wanting your content out there. That's what I love to teach.
Have you stopped chasing the algorithms? Are you like,
no. No, if you stop chasing the algorithm, your content doesn't get seen. So, I mean, it's a fun chase, right? It's a like pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is the algorithm. And so it could be, it's like that thing where it's like what I thought my plan would be. And it's like a straight line. And it's like what it actually ended up being. And it like does this. And then you get to the end. I'm like, yeah, but there's beauty in that chaos for someone like me, like someone who thrives in this kind of an environment. Other people, it would drive them crazy. Like I can't figure it out. Like the accountants. No offense, Mom. My mom's an accountant, so I feel like I can say that. Very much like, here's how it works, And I'm like, let's try this and figure out and learn from it. The biggest part is that you have to learn from it. You have to look at your data. You have to look at you can also, gut feelings are great, but gut with data, even better.
Yeah. I'm going to use the word leaders, and leaders to you might mean, it might be a CMO at a corporate environment, but I'm thinking of leaders at University of Texas or other higher ed that might be deans or, professors or other leadership in the administration who might be watching this, and they're thinking about social. Maybe they post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, Instagram once a week, once a month. And let me tell you this. I think the barrier to entry is very interesting to me. Mm-hmm. For someone to produce a 30-second commercial and air it on the Super Bowl is really difficult, but for someone to pick up a phone and send out a post is really easy. So the barrier to entry on social is super interesting. So when I ask you about leaders, if you're talking to a leader right now and they're like, well, Noelle, tell me what I should be doing. On Monday, what would you tell them they should or should not be doing?
We should audit their social as it is now and see what's working, what's not working, because you can't just start trying something if you haven't tried anything or if you have tried these different things. When I've worked with leaders in the past, it's like, hey, let's just open your laptop. Like, let's look at your LinkedIn real quick. Let's see what you're doing, and looking at it that way. Then that gives you the fork in the road. If they're really active and not seeing what they want in terms of engagement or response or reaction, that's a different conversation. If they have literally just yesterday set up an account or they don't even have an account, like that's a very different conversation. And a very different approach. So if you're starting from zero, that algorithm does not trust that you are a human. And so it's building that up. I try to give people a kind of reality check that it could be 90 days until they see solid growth or performance. That goes for a person or a new student org here on campus. Or any campus. And so it could take about 90 days for an algorithm to really pick up and see that you're legit. But if you've already been really active, this other route, what I would tell them is, we'll see, are you just pushing or are you also engaging and reacting? Are you being social on social media or are you just pushing? And so the algorithm also doesn't love that. The algorithm loves the time that you spend on their platform and that you are contributing to it. And so that's goes for all of the different algorithms, but very much so for LinkedIn.
Do you encourage senior level executives, like the leadership? Do you encourage them to be online?
Yeah. So I work with the president every week here at UT. I worked with the president almost every day or the chancellor every day at CU. I worked with the president at Pepperdine every week. And so it really, depending on the goals, right? So the LinkedIn one is thought leadership, and how they show up there isn't necessarily only for alumni or current, it's for their peers. And so their deans of the schools or their presidents and chancellors. And then showing up on the student channels is so much harder depending on the personality of the president or of the leader, but it's not impossible. And so it's showing up in how you have that likability factor with the students, because a lot of times, at every institution that I've worked at, when there's not a snow day, they're like, oh, this guy hates us. And it's like, well, no, he didn't make that decision, or, it was a committee of people, but okay. And so it's figuring out how to humanize them and how to make it, but not bring them down. They're not doing a dunk tank, even if they want to. It's like, let's keep the respect of the office, but let's also have that likability and human factor. And that's a very fine line with certain positions and certain personalities, that having a team of people to help you make those decisions is key, and not just trusting what you think.
Can I ask you, like, squarely, Noelle, like, how has AI really changed what you do, what your team does, what the landscape looks like in the last few years? How has it materially changed everything about what you do and how you engage?
Yeah, it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. And so it's like, oh, use it to help speed up processes, or use it to help. A lot of it is around efficiency and like speeding up things. And, like I said, I'm very competitive. I like to go quickly, but it's not always the right path to go fast. And so it's that whole thing of like, do you want good, fast, or cheap? Or good, fast, or cheap. Yeah. And so it's kind of, I keep coming back to that, where it's like, yeah, you could use AI, but it always feels like it, no matter how well you've trained your agent. Like, no matter how well you're like, I need this to be more human. I need to stop with the M dashes, like you don't need 5 of them, but also like rip to the M dash. It like ruined M dashes. Now everybody assumes it's just AI, but it's not. And so it's, how many times can you how much time can you waste trying to train this agent when you could just do it yourself? And so I think there are ways to use it, and ways that I've used it have been like, hey, I kind of want to, I'm thinking about a post kind of like this, and here's some of the things I'm thinking about. Like, what do you think? And then I'm like, oh, okay. A lot of times I'm like, that was garbage, but it gave me the idea that I needed. It's the springboard.
Creating efficiencies in your process on the background, but also creating content ideation. Is that like
ideation? Yes. Yeah. So I think for ideation, my whole thing with all of across campus, whether it was in Colorado or here in Texas or within my teams anywhere, the big thing is everything needs to have a human edit, right? Especially when it comes to captions. And so just because you can fully hear doesn't mean that those that rely on captions, whether they're hard of hearing or fully deaf, like we can't just be like, oh, it's good enough, because that's not the definition of accessibility. And so being able to produce content using AI to help you with the captions, you have to edit that just so it's equitable to everyone who wants to have your content and consume your content and not just close enough.
Have you seen any data on the volume of content being produced and published on social? Meaning, since the release, I'll just say, of ChatGPT coming up 3.5 years ago, 3+ years ago, is there just a volume increase? And is that how is that impacting engagement?
Yeah, I don't have the data on it, but there is a lot of AI slop, as it's called, out there, a lot. And it's funny to me because it's very generational who can spot it and who falls for it. I hate to call my mom out, but she'll send me things and I'm like, Mom, that's AI. And she's like, but it's such a cute dog, or it's such a cute I don't care if it's AI. And I'm like, but you should. And so, there's people across the country in different institutions. And, I'm sure here at UT that are using it more as the replacement, which I can't get on board with that. There needs to be, it will never replace a human.
It also seems like those lines are becoming blurred as creative and video and content voice is becoming closer to the human side. I am a believer of authenticity, and I see the value in real human beings. But it kind of gets me back to your team and kind of social media teams or individuals in the spaces that you're in. How do you prevent the burnout? How do you when a crisis hits at 2 a.m, you might be working on trajectory of editorial calendars and here's what we're doing in the next month. And all of a sudden a crisis hits or a football team wins or the entire narrative changes. So you have to be on, your team has to be on. How do you prevent burnout?
Yeah, I don't let my team, we'll have a calendar for the next 6 weeks. We have it, pretty much baked with holds here and there for things that come up, or holds, we know something around these days are going to come up. But I don't let them write content and put it in for approval more than 36 hours in advance. Because if one thing we learned from the pandemic is it's always changing and things always come up. And so being a social media manager during the pandemic was a fresh kind of hell. And so it was, but it definitely put the people who were going to do it and keep going and could be resilient. Not saying that other people weren't resilient, but it's the ones that could really, I always talk about how we have to turn into a robot when things happen, and not saying that's a good thing, but I'm very good at it. And so you just shut down, you robot your way through it. But then the most important part is how you unrobot. And so how do you unwind and detach and put your work phone or your phones away and go for a walk, go with your friends, talk to a therapist, talk to your mom, what that could be. Being a robot is a good quality when it's needed, but how to unwind that. And that's really what I think leaders in social can really teach the younger, coming up and through young professionals, of how to do that in a healthy way and not just shut down and nothing matters and we're fine and we just have to power through. That's so unhealthy. Don't do that.
Well, there's this, this notion you mentioned, stopping the thumb from scrolling. We are kind of a doom scrolling world right now. And the world that you live in whether it's 17-year-olds going to undergrad or even graduates looking at upper education for their masters, you're still at a pretty young demographic. Now, certainly there's parents and other engagement across social that might not be in that demographic, but that is the doom scrolling kind of Generation Z, if you will. When I think about algorithms and I think about AI generating just vast majority of content and the AI slop you mentioned, can I ask you a prediction? No, let me ask you to predict, will we even be scrolling through social media in 3 to 5 years? Or will AI agents just be doing all of that for us?
Well, that sounds like a Black Mirror episode. What are you talking about? Oh man, I could just see an embeddable, TikTok's going to come out with an embeddable contact and you just can watch it from there. That would freak me out. But now that I say it, I'm like, ooh, I should patent that. I hope there's still, I hope that never comes true. I'm a big fan of AI and robots and helping, I can't turn my lights on without my Alexas, I have colored lights, I can turn on and off, all of the different things all programmed by a robot. I think that's fine. I appreciate that, better, easier living through robotics. But when it comes to that human connection, I've seen the downfall of social and how detrimental it can be. I was asked not too long ago, if I knew kind of where social was and where it was going and the impact it had on vast majorities of people in terms of mental health and just self-worth, like would I still do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I probably would have gone a different marketing direction. But that being said, I still think that human connection that social can provide for some people, especially for marginalized youth that may or may not have a connection or someone that believes in them or loves them or trusts them, social media like really flattens the earth and allows them to reach out to people. On the flip side, it also, there's a lot of bad actors out there. And so I think when it comes to how social will be in the next 3 to 5 years, I think there's going to be, you know, look at Australia, they've gotten rid of minors being on social. I think that if it survives all the lawsuits, I think that could be potentially something that we see, which would definitely impact higher ed marketing. And so I don't necessarily disagree with it either, which may be like horrible for someone in my position to say, but I think we need to be, as a society, better about protecting our youth from the constant being online. And I don't know if AI can help with that. I think AI actually might make that worse.
So one of the questions I did want to have for you, because you've been in the space 15 plus years, if there is someone coming into the social media space and they want to take on kind of your role, but they're more junior, what are the 3 or 4 things you would tell someone, maybe telling your younger self in their early 20s coming into the space, that they should be doing right now? What should they be focusing on?
The thing that I always tell, you know, I have informational interviews with students all the time. I love working and talking with students. And my biggest thing is you can be super creative and you can be super punny and funny and be like the best Photoshop person ever. But if you don't know the data behind it, you can't tell me why, you can't tell data's story. That's what I look for as a hiring manager is, are the strategy wheels running? You don't need to be leading the strategy or understand it, but just you're kind of thinking about it. So that's one big thing, is just understanding beyond just really what happens after you hit publish. And so, and that piece. And so that's a big one. The other one is just resilience, and that in the nicest way possible is that everybody thinks it's such a sexy job. Ooh, boy, it can be. You know, I worked every home football game at CU. That was amazing during the Dion years, right? So that was incredible to be on the field with him and all the players and all the famous people that came to. But then that was 5 Saturdays in a fall throughout my whole year. And so there's a lot of other things that happen. So having that resiliency and really understanding how to, I think I'm going to coin this phrase, unrobot. You know, how do you do that? And what do you do to take care of yourself? And then the third one is really understanding your why. Like, why are you in this? For me in higher ed, that is my industry. I've tried to leave twice for corporate and came crawling back. And that I found my industry, and that's really what I want to talk about and be in and be involved in. But for some that I've worked with in the past, like they love the agency life. And so really going and trying all the different types of social media jobs, whether it's in-house agency, whether it's a traditional agency working with many clients. And so figuring out kind of what you want would be just figuring out that why you want to do it and who you want to do it for. So figuring out the data, understanding what happens after publish, and then really finding that resilience and how to recharge and unrobot, and then figuring out your why and how and who you want to work for. One of the biggest things my dad told me when I was graduating, I graduated in the bottom of the recession in December of 2008. And he told me there's 3 things you need to juxtapose. You can love your job, you can love the money, or you can love where you live. None of them can tie. You have to rank them. And so I've taken that with me throughout my career. I bop around a lot. I was in LA for 8 years, Colorado for 6 or 7, and then I'm down here. I'm from a small town in California. I was in San Diego for 8 years. And so I bop around a lot. I need to love where I live. And so I love that, and I need to love my job. And if I can pay my bills, I hope my boss isn't listening to this. If I can pay my bills, I'm good. And so that's just been my juxtaposition. And a lot of when I talk with younger people, especially early career or like soon to be college grads, I pass that into my son too, because it's been really helpful for me to have those 3 to just kind of check in with myself. Am I still good? Or is this still how I'm ranking them? And loving my job always has to come number 1. And then the other 2 are ranked that way as well.
No, it's nice. I love that. Can I ask you, from your role, like leading social media, is your focus targeting prospective students, the parents of prospective students, or more kind of what I would call the peer group, those who might be in the higher ed space? Who are you targeting as your priority?
Yes.
I
It
knew you were
really
going to say
depends. It depends on the platform and really the time of year. And so during application season, we're very much focused on that's also at the beginning of the school year. So one platform, one Instagram will be talking about the new student experience and really welcoming them, whereas my admissions counterparts that I work very closely with are doing application recruiting. And so, because that's when the application kicks off. So, but then that versus our, business school or school of law or football team, they all in the same month will be talking about relatively the same thing, kind of the new beginning of the school year, but they all have very different target audiences. And so what I really love about my position is that I get to have main channels, act as Grand Central Station. Everyone finds, University of Texas at Austin, they're going to find the main channels first. And then I make sure they go out to the constituent group that they want. And so the trains come in and then I send them back out. And so depending on the time of year, what platform, who, what the goal is, if it's a fundraising goal or if it's an application goal, or if we're just posting beautiful photos of the tower with, the spring tulips that just came out. It's different every day, every hour. I love it.
I kind of led the witness and gave you three audiences: students, prospective students, the parent of, and then kind of the peer group. Yeah. Do you have other audiences that you typically look at, or are those kind of the big buckets?
Yeah, our young alumni and our alumni in general, Texas X's are very strong. Yeah, so the Texas X's, I think we have 400,000 living alumni at last count. And so that's also just a really fun team to work with. The Texas X's team has great content, great ideas. It's a very strong affinity, and the traditions and stuff are just wonderful at SEC schools. And so that's a very key audience for us as well. And then, anybody who really has a passion for UT. Being an urban campus, anyone in Austin area grew up with UT in the background and watching the skyline change. The tower has always been there. And so for, generations. And so the tower just turned 89. So it's been around for generations. And then just the legacy of being a Longhorn, you just have that if you're born into it. It's very different from small town California. We didn't have that. And so it's been so much fun to just kind of adopt the Longhorn lifestyle of like, oh, okay, like this is what we do here. Like, cool.
So I was kind of bucketing into three, but now I'm thinking about 100 more. But like donor management, donor relations, do you touch on that? So do you have any hierarchy, or are you kind of flattening all of the audiences?
Again, it kind of depends on the time of year. I think students are always the center of my story, the current students, because that's really who we're here for. I don't think if you work in higher ed and you're not here for the students, you're kind of in it for the wrong reasons. And so if I had to juxtapose them, I think the students would be our top priority and should be who we serve. And then everyone else kind of comes in after that. Right. And so the students are definitely who we serve.
Well, then let me flip that. So like the audience that you might be targeting, certainly I get that. You're kind of like trying to communicate to all. I love the fact that you're thinking about students, kind of student-centric. If you're speaking from a voice, are you typically speaking from a student voice from the social media platform? Are you taking on that hat, or are you taking more the institutional voice?
Yeah, I hate constantly saying it depends, but it really does. And so on the student platform, my content creator was recently, she's a recent grad from UT. And so Bailey does an amazing job speaking student. I definitely am like that guy in the movie with the skateboard, what's up, the little use. And so she helps. She crushes it over there on just speaking youth and what they want to see and how they want to see it. Whereas my other Wilbur, my other direct report, is older. And so he can, do the briefcase app better than others. And not to say that Bailey and Wilbur can't like cross over, but it's like, that's their strengths. And so being a leader, really leaning into that. But then as a strategist of kind of laying out the level of it, I wouldn't want to be too cheeky on LinkedIn. I just don't think it would land very well, just given all the experience. Occasionally it can, but I don't think an R1 institution should, in my opinion, be too cheeky on the briefcase app.
I'm hearing cotton candy. I'm hearing broccoli. I'm hearing briefcase. It's a whole new vernacular.
I know. Welcome to my first language. That's why I always start trainings. This is my first language. If I'm saying something you don't understand, just pause. Let me know.
So before we wrap, let me just ask you a couple very direct questions. Is there anything you're very, very excited about in kind of the space that you're in? Something that's around the corner, something that you're seeing, is something that you're thinking about, something you're super excited about in the space?
Commencement season is coming in higher ed. That is always just so exciting. Every institution has cool students doing cool things. And so I think a lot of times by commencement, we're all burned out. It's been a long year. March and April are really hard on college campuses because there's so much going on, but like May and June's right around the corner. And so we just start kicking off our class of 26 features. And I just get so excited when the team that's working on it says, reports back on who they've interviewed, what content they've captured. I cannot wait for those to come out. We are going to do some amazing storytelling in the next couple of months, and I can't wait.
I love it. I can tell. I can
can't wait.
feel the excitement. I'm going to ask the other side of that. What is something you're super worried about, super concerned about, whether it's within like your own higher ed institution, say social space, or just more broadly? What are you worried about?
Worried in not a bad way, but worried about doing right by is the new accessibility laws that come into effect at the end of April. They are inherently very hard to follow on social media as the platforms are now. So what keeps me up at night is, will Instagram finally update itself to where I can have proper alt text on stories, or am I going to have to figure that out? And so it's, how do we make our channels accessible and not just like good enough? How do we actually follow the federal law of ADA under these new guidelines? And so that is definitely a stress and worry. And that's not just higher ed, that is everyone. The accessibility laws are coming out at the end of April. So we're training into those now. And so I'm every week like, okay, this week we're going to really focus on making sure alt text is here. Okay, now we're going to really make sure our color is accessible, like the color percentage of this versus that. And so making sure that that's accessible. Okay, now this week we're going to focus on adding audio descriptors if it's important. And so there's just a lot of huge changes, and I'm really excited that they're coming out because it's going to make it so much more accessible and equitable to those that engage with content in general. But it's not going to be easy. And so my advice to people is start training it up now, because if you wait till the end of April, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
I appreciate that. I'm not that deeply immersed in it. I'm aware of it. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. Noelle, I do want to let you go. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to touch on before we drop? Anything we should have talked about or missed?
No, we had a great conversation. I think we covered a lot of the different bases. I'm sure there's something that in 5 minutes I'm like, oh man, I think if I were to leave a piece of advice for those that may be coming up in this or may manage other social people, is having grace with yourself and having grace with those that work for you or with you that are in the social space. It's very ugly these days. There's just a lot going on, regardless of how you slice and dice it. And so, social people are on constantly, 25/8, like we had talked about. And so it's having grace with yourself, having grace with your team, and having grace with those that work in social, is that sometimes it's hard for us to disconnect. And so if we seem off or if we seem, down, ask us about it. If you have that relationship with them, if they need a mental health, I'm constantly asking my team, like, especially after our tragedy here recently, do you need a day off? Like, do you need half a day? Do you need to work from home? And so it's having that grace with each other, even if you're not in social. Let's have grace and be kind. Let's just do that with everybody that we come in contact with. You never know what they're going through.
It's a nice way to wrap. Let me ask you this. Where can people find you? I'm assuming everywhere online. Where's the best way to find Dr. Noelle Seybert?
Yeah, my favorite, it just kind of surprises people when I say my favorite social media platform is LinkedIn. It's where I get a lot of my news, and it's where I like to really keep up with people and just see what people are researching or publishing or being, what's exciting them. So I am the only Noelle Seybert that you will find on there. So go find me over there. I think I am blonde in my photo, so don't be fooled. I just changed my hair a lot.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Noelle, thank you so much. Really great conversation. Appreciate kind of the intersection of the social media space in higher ed institutions. You just tackle it, and you've been in the space a long time. So really, really value a lot of the insight you brought. Listen, if you've joined us today, listening to Disruptor Confessions or watching it on YouTube, thanks for taking the time. If you valued this conversation with Noelle, please share it, subscribe, follow along. You can join us on Substack. Again, Noelle, thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.